Our last session for today is with Sephora CMO, Deborah Yeh. Sephora has been leading the industry when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Deborah has been a vocal DEI champion for the entire retail industry. We're thrilled to have her here today. Deborah, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Veronica. Thanks for having me.
It is my pleasure. It's my pleasure. So Sephora has gone above and beyond to champion diversity, equity, and inclusion. Can you provide an overview of your efforts and explain why DEI is so important to the company?
Sure, let's set it up. Diversity, equity, and inclusion have always been a priority at Sephora. They've been actually core to our mission since we were founded as a new kind of beauty company, right? If you think about it, it was revolutionary at the time when Sephora came to the States to, be a store that allowed consumers to browse and to explore prestige beauty freely without putting it behind a glass counter, right? And it's always been one of our HR values as well. Our informal and formal celebrations honor beauty advisors who demonstrate respect for all and a passion for serving our clients. But as an organization, we haven't necessarily been talking about these beliefs publicly. So that changed in 2019 when we started a campaign called We Belong to Something Beautiful, which was meant as an external, ongoing articulation of our values and a commitment to the industry, to our employees, to our clients, that we would never stop working to make beauty a place where everyone felt like they belong. A lot has transpired in our country since then, and DE&I has become front and center. But we're super proud to have continued our commitment to this cause with efforts across every area of our business, from the store experience to marketing and merchandising, and to our training and recruitment efforts.
That's awesome. And we'll kind of dig into each of those pillars as we have this conversation. So I want to start with kind of the broader retail community, because you just recently announced this large initiative to combat racial bias in stores. Tell us about that initiative.
Yeah, just a little bit ambitious, right?
Just a little bit.
Well, we know that racism unfortunately affects nearly every institution in society, and retail is not immune. So one of the things that we encountered a couple of years ago was this interesting poll from Gallup that reported that Black Americans were more likely to experience unfair treatment at a retail establishment than in their dealings with the police. So if you're like me, this statistic is like totally disheartening. But of course, we're retailers, right? We are constantly thinking about how to improve the customer experience. And here was an area that clearly needed dramatic improvement across the industry. So guided by our commitment to create a more inclusive retail experience, we actually set out to better understand and address the issue. We recently commissioned and just announced a first of its kind study on the state of racially biased treatment in US retail. And we found a lot of really interesting things. But first and foremost, that racial bias at retail is prevalent, with 2 out of 3 shoppers saying that they've experienced poor treatment due to their race or ethnicity. Our research team, led by 2 academic experts, Dr. Cassie Pittman-Clater and Dr. David Crockett, actually helped provide to us a conceptual map. We think about customer journeys, and this is a customer journey that showed us how this happens. And so if the shopping experience is a road, there are some travelers who experience, unfortunately, an extra tax or an extra toll that blocks their way. And this can mean anything from their products being hidden in the ethnic aisle to being underserved, or potentially even feeling watched or treated suspiciously. So, shoppers of color will say, yeah, we know this has been happening. This is not new news. But ultimately, our goal here was to not only measure the problem, but also start to identify tactics that we as a retail industry can go after to create an environment that serves all of our customers. So, it was a really rich study. It identified places where we could all work to improve the experience for shoppers of color. Some of those things, just to highlight some of those findings, include offering timely assistance to people looking for help, freely sharing information about offers and new products, understanding the unique needs of our shoppers of color, and then having employees that look like our whole community and can communicate in all the languages that are necessary. So, lots of learnings here. We at Sephora are using, of course, all of these findings to guide a pretty robust action plan on our part. But we are also hoping that other retailers will be intrigued by these results and really invest in learning more to come up with an action plan that's relevant to them as well.
Wow, that's amazing. So it's so much more than just hiring the right people. It's about having the right products, making them visible, making sure everyone is seen and heard. It seems like quite an ambitious plan.
It is, I mean, I think that like you apply to all of the learnings that you get in a good kind of retail background to like look at the customer experience in a 360-degree manner. And of course, what this does is highlight many different places in the journey where a retailer could dive in and really start to improve the experience for their consumers.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's amazing. And and Sephora was one of the first retailers to take the 15% pledge. If I recall, it was only 9 days after Aurora James posted the challenge on Instagram.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit? What drove the company to participate and really like take a leadership role? Because other retailers followed, but only after kind of Sephora had stood up and said, "We're going to do this."
Sure. So Aurora James is an amazing contact and colleague with us at Sephora. She actually started an entire movement with just one Instagram post. It was like a post-it note that actually said in handwriting, "Here is one thing you can do for us." Everyone was thinking about like what could the corporate answer to this experience that we were seeing in 2020 could be. And so, she was calling it out. So we answered the calling because we recognize the opportunity to continue to live out our commitments as a company to build a more inclusive beauty community. And, beauty community is not just consumers, right? It includes the entrepreneurs and the brands. So, products an area in which Sephora has a unique set of skills. We don't call our brands vendors, for instance. They are our partners and our founders. And our merchant team's especially involved in like literally sometimes getting in the kitchen with aspiring founders. We call this brand incubation. So we actually knew that we had some expertise to make a difference in the kind of brands that were successfully brought to market. So, this was a fairly quick decision on our part to take the pledge, but I will just say that our ongoing commitment isn't actually about quickly signing new deals. We actually are diving into the full procurement process, if you will, looking at how we scout and how we vet brands, and also how we partner in the long term. Just to give you an example here to start, we have always had, or actually for years now, have had an Accelerate program, which was originally founded to cultivate female founders. But we actually tightened the focus of that program to focus on BIPOC founded and owned brands. And so the program is going to offer a robust curriculum, some mentorship, merchandising support, potential funding, and even introductions to the investor community. The goal here being that we want these founders to really kind of be part of a thriving ecosystem to support them. So we're excited about this. Our applications were accepted, I believe, this fall, and we are just about to announce the initial class of founders that we'll be working with. So that's just one example. Building on all of these things, we have reviewed hundreds of brands since our original pledge, and we are excited to be able to, by the end of this year, double our assortment of Black-owned brands.
Wow, that's incredibly fast and ambitious. And I mean, I love what you're doing with Sephora Accelerate. That's such a great opportunity to help stand up some young companies that could use some extra support to bring their products to life. It's incredible. And doubling is a big ambitious goal. What actions are you taking to really like measure performance, and how are you? I know you guys are being very, very transparent about reporting back to the community on everything you're doing. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Measurement is actually a huge part of our effort. It started with a study, right, which is in itself about measurements. And then, of course, there's measurement around accountability. So I'll talk about a couple of different things that we're doing along this line. I think the first thing to actually note is that one of the things that we learned with our research is that the traditional retail measures around customer satisfaction, NPS, may not be tuned in enough to really help us fully monitor what's happening in terms of inclusion in retail. We actually found that many incidences of racial bias go unreported, which is potentially a reason why retailers aren't as actively engaged into this topic as one might expect. So to kind of give you a sense of how we're addressing that, we're implementing a new in-store DE&I dashboard that's going to help us provide analytics on client service and feedback to our stores on a monthly basis, as well as to measure employee training and participation and efficacy. So that's kind of one example, which reflects kind of an in-the-moment type of tracking. There's also a broader type of tracking that we need to do, which is to see how we are kind of building against our overall strategy as a company. So to give you an example of what we're doing there, we actually have made inclusivity a priority for every corporate employee as well. And we're evolving our employee performance reviews to include a new inclusivity-based performance metric. This, of course, can vary from person to person depending on their scope. So for instance, supervisors can create more inclusive team cultures, right? And focus on their hiring practices. Individual contributors can get involved in any of our 11 task forces, which are implementing plans. So this gives you a little bit of a sense of how corporate is being involved. Holistically, what we're going to be doing is tracking against a very comprehensive plan. And our intent here is to publish our findings and our results biannually on our website.
Wow, that's amazing. And it would imagine how it would be if the entire retail industry kind of committed to this and did the same thing. There's a lot of power in what you're doing and the leadership that you have here. I want to kind of shift gears for a second and talk about your marketing efforts, because you are the CMO of Sephora and it's a big part of what you do. How has diversity, equity, and inclusion been incorporated into your marketing campaigns?
Sure. So, within marketing, our actions are to increase representation and promote inclusivity before shoppers even enter our stores, right? It's all about consumers being able to see themselves reflected in a retailer's marketing. And while we've always aimed to create inclusive images, we also want to be purposeful about the representation in front of and behind the camera as well. So we're implementing new marketing production guidelines, for instance, to ensure that creative decisions reflect and uplift our communities. For instance, if we are doing a hair campaign, we want to make sure that we're hiring a hairstylist who feels great styling textured hair. That's just one example. We're also just expanding the breadth of our content. I think we've spoken in the past, Veronica, about how Sephora approaches content. And one of the things that we're trying to do here is to make sure that we're meeting clients' unique needs. We are publishing how-to videos about how to find a sunscreen, for instance, that doesn't create a white cast on dark skin. Or techniques like how do you do a smoky eye on an Asian monolid, right? We've also done things like adding more closed captioning and expanding the library of Spanish language tutorials on our YouTube channel, as well as Instagram videos. So lots of effort and content. What's super cool about having real clarity about one's values is that we've actually found a way to weave diversity, equity, and inclusion to a lot of our marketing decisions in many programs. So for instance, we relaunched our Beauty Insider loyalty program just this last year, and we actually added a feature where clients could donate their points. And what we've done here is we've focused on a set of charities and nonprofits that are all focused on fighting for inclusive communities. And in 6 months, this has resulted in more than $2 million worth of donations. So, it's interesting. You can kind of think about marketing, of course, as the image part of what we do, but we also want to think about marketing in terms of all of the different touch points and forms of activation that we have with our consumers.
It makes a lot of sense. It's so comprehensive. It sounds like, from everything from your actual campaigns to your to the content you create. It really covers the whole 9 yards. So I guess in terms of, we talked about some of your employee efforts, and you mentioned how you have diversity kind of included in the goals of all of your employees, whether they're leaders or individual contributors. Sure. How are you recruiting to ensure that you have a diverse team, as well as kind of promoting the executives you have in-house?
That's right. We want to make sure that we have a field level audience or workforce that reflects our communities. And then we want to advance all of our employees to higher levels of leadership in the organization. So a couple of things just to highlight here. We're going to be broadening our recruitment and career advancement processes for employees of color by providing new resource toolkits for hiring managers so that everyone who has hiring decision-making authority can get involved. We're also going to be expanding our existing partnerships with associations who are dedicated to the advancement of employees of color. There are a lot of best practices here, and we want to take advantage of them. Lastly, we want to identify key markets for recruiting events so that we can increase our representation. So that's just the start on the recruiting side of things. Later this spring, we're actually going to be rolling out some exciting new emerging talent programs to make sure that we're not just placing diversity into the organization, but we are elevating folks, giving them all of the context that they need to be successful, and ensuring that they rise up to greater levels within the organization. So those are just some examples. We want to think about this just like we do with our product pipeline. There's, of course, a talent pipeline involved, and it's pretty important for us to make sure that we are finding and pursuing opportunities along every area of that journey.
That's amazing. Really love that. Love that you're kind of looking at it from a, not only from a like making sure you're finding the right candidates, but making sure that you're also developing your employees so that they can move up. It's really kind of key in all to invest in all parts of this.
That's right.
So I guess as a kind of final question, we frequently see that diversity, equity, and inclusion leads to business success. We know that. But are there business benefits to DEI that our audience may just not be thinking about?
Yeah, I'm reading a lot of the same studies that you are. A lot of them do point to how organizations who are focused on DE&I are more innovative, they're more creative, they're more agile. And like, what marketer doesn't want that, right? And certainly in beauty, which is a face-forward business, we absolutely have to get this right. I believe in all of these things. But I've also, been in business long enough to know that avoiding loss or not leaving money on the table can be very motivating for companies as well. And our data did show that racially biased and unfair treatment ultimately costs retailers a great deal. After experiencing unfair treatment, our study showed that 3 out of 5 BIPOC shoppers are unlikely to visit that specific location again, and 2 out of 5 are unlikely to visit any outlet of that store. Okay. So, this is a calling to the entire retail industry, right? If we can, as an industry, obsess about things like page load time and cart abandonment and SEO optimization, we surely have enough time and energy to think about an issue that so deeply affects all of our consumers. It's a lot of hard work. We probably will always be at it. But you should hopefully see, with me at least, my passion and belief that it's possible to strive to make retail a place that is more welcoming and inclusive for everybody.
That's such an excellent point, because earlier in the summit, we talked about customer lifetime value, and everyone's thinking about every single touch point and how they can make customer service seamless. But then we kind of miss this element where a certain percent of our customers may not experience that same high touch, amazing customer service. And it's like just fixing that can have such a tremendous business impact. And it's great that you're shedding light on that, because I think it's so important.
Thank you. I mean, I think it's also, defining the customers that we have. Like, are we actually missing customers altogether? Forget about lifetime value, by the way. Are we thinking about the total potential audience of our products and services? Let's start there. Are we welcoming them to even, try and participate in our retail establishment? And then finally, of course, yes, absolutely. Are we engaging them, rewarding their loyalty, and giving them a reason to stick with us?
All important reasons for focusing on DEI as a retail business. Wow. Thank you so much for joining us. But more importantly, thank you so much for trailblazing in this important area and really providing an inspiration to our community. It's been such a pleasure to interview you today and get to spend time with you and talk about this effort.
Thanks, Veronica. I'm super passionate about this issue, and I'm glad that I could just share some of our learnings.
And now I'd like to give our sponsors one final thank you. We couldn't make this event possible without them, and a big shout out to our platinum sponsors, Content Square, Crealytics, and ShareID. We also want to make sure we get your feedback on the Commerce Next Marketing Summit series. We're going to be sending you our survey tomorrow. Please take a moment, tell us how we did. It is as a result of your feedback that we continue to evolve our virtual programming. So we really appreciate you taking the time. If you missed any session in the Commerce Next Marketing Summit series, we have a YouTube channel, so don't worry. You can find all of the sessions on replay at youtube.com/commercenext. Now, just a reminder, our first Commerce Next webinar for this year is on Wednesday, February 17th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific time. It's going to be on gift commerce, and it features Sucharita Kodali from Forrester. You can register at bit.ly/CNWeb27. Now we'll be moving into our happy hour. For those of you that pre-registered, you should have received your wine, your bourbon, or chocolates last week. For retailers and brands that didn't pre-register, don't worry. We have a BYOB happy hour, and that is available to you. And for everyone else, we thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to host you over the last few weeks, and we hope to see you at the upcoming webinars. To get to the happy hour, just go to sessions. You'll see it right there. Thanks again, and we hope to see you soon.